Each and every year, Vegas has those teams that they just cling on to, and they really don't live up to the expectations that Vegas sets in the preseason. Whether it be that a new quarterback is in town, or a franchise has just fallen off in terms of talent, there always seems to be a lot of these teams that they fall in love with that just the hype shouldn't be there. And I don't get the hype around some of these teams. Today, we will be looking at the 5 teams who I think Vegas might be a little bit too high on. This is by no means saying that these teams will be bad or even that they'll miss the playoffs, but I believe they are teams that are going to underperform given the expectations. We will be looking at Vegas over-unders, but I think the media also just has some darlings that they fall in love with, so we'll be talking about a couple of those as well. Leave a like, subscribe if you are new. Let's take a look at the 5 most overhyped teams entering the 2024 NFL season. The first team that I want to talk about are the Houston Texans. Now, before I get any angry hate comments telling me why I'm wrong and that I'm just a biased Colts fan, let me tell you why I think this is the case. Houston won the AFC South last year and were the sleeper team who came out of nowhere and shocked everyone. One bad throw by Gardner Minshew took this team to the playoffs where they got to beat a banged up Cleveland team. They had a remarkable season, but I think some things get lost in the narratives. For one, it feels people are underrating the rest of the division. Indy, Tennessee, and Jacksonville all got better at key positions, and Houston has one of the tougher schedules in the league. This was a team who won the division by 1 game, and they are going to be in a tight race yet again this year. On top of that, I think some of the offseason moves are being overhyped as well. Danielle Hunter was a fantastic signing, and I have no complaints there, but Stephon Diggs showed some real signs of regression in the second half of last season. His drops, his yards per route, and his games with 100+ receiving yards fell off drastically in the second half of the year. He is a wide receiver who has forced his way out of 2 situations now. On a Houston team where he may be the third option on offense, there could be some concerns within that locker room given how he has acted in previous situations. On top of that, Joe Mixon isn't the player he used to be, and honestly might be one of the most overrated players in the league in my opinion. He was 63rd in the NFL in yards per carry last year. He had his worst yards after contacts since his rookie season, and people look at the 1,034 rushing yards, but they don't tell the picture. His quickness isn't the same anymore, and you match that with the fact that I think the secondary could also have some major struggles. Their CB2 spot is really up in the air right now, and there's not a lot of stability there. I didn't love Lassiter for them in the second round, and Jeff Okudah is a placeholder right now. Desmond King is solid, but he's getting up there in age, and this is still a Houston team that I expect to be really good. Don't get me wrong, they're going to be competitive, they're probably going to be a wildcard team at the very worst, but what I have trouble with is the people putting them in Super Bowl conversations and saying that they are the runaway division champions. This is going to be a tight division race, and while I do still think they're a playoff team, I think we need to slow down the narrative just a little bit on the Houston Texans. The next team I want to talk about are the Los Angeles Chargers. This is a team that held the 5th pick in the NFL draft, and they lost a lot of key pieces on both sides of the football. Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen, and Mike Williams are all gone, and this team has a major shortage in terms of weapons on their roster. And I think that could come back to hurt them in a loaded AFC. The big move the Chargers made was hiring Jim Harbaugh to be the franchise's next head coach, and while I think he's going to do a great job, I think there could be some growing pains in the early years of his Chargers tenure. They have some pieces I really love. I think Justin Herbert could take a major step up, but the weapons are going to take a major step back. Quentin Johnston has tools, but it doesn't even look like he's going to make the roster after he continues to struggle with his hands in camp, and he had some horrible drops as a rookie. Josh Palmer is coming off an injury, and I really do like him, and Ladd McConkey is as fantastic as he is. I think you're asking a lot of him to be a wide receiver 1 right out of the gate. In terms of the running back room, J.K. Dobbins has a significant injury history, and Gus Edwards is more a power back at this point. They have some potential pieces to build on, but I think right now their win total is at 8.5, and I think that is way too high for a team that still has a ton of question marks going into the year. I think they're going to be between 6 and 7 wins this year, and they got a lot of questions that they're going to have to answer for me. The Saints' over-under of 7.5 wins might be one of the worst lines I've ever seen. For one, their division got better all around them. Each team improved in this division, except New Orleans. Derek Carr was pretty bad for the Saints last year, and his arm talent has fallen off a cliff. On top of that, this offensive line is the worst in the NFL. Outside of Cesar Ruiz and Eric McCoy, which neither of them are elite players at their position either, every position on the offensive line feels like a liability with tons of question marks, especially considering Ryan Ramczyk is out for the year. On top of that, this is a wide receiver room that is a real struggle, and you're asking a lot out of Chris Olave. I also think Dennis Allen is arguably the worst head coach in the NFL right now, and while he does a good job with this defense, I wouldn't be shocked if he gets fired early on when this team struggles. When you look at this roster, no position group feels like a strength. Maybe the running back room is strong, but the secondary has questions, the D-line has questions, and the offensive line has a ton of questions as well. Marshawn Lattimore has been in trade rumors all offseason, Cam Jordan is getting up there in age, and Chase Young, who's a fine player, almost got benched in the Super Bowl last year. So I don't know if you have long-term solutions at edge either. Demario Davis is clearly this team's best player, but that's not enough, and I would venture to say that New Orleans has a better chance of having the worst record in the NFL than being a playoff team. I hate this roster, and as long as they keep kicking the financial can down the road, they are going to continue to be stuck in financial purgatory, and they're not going to be able to make moves that they need to. The Miami Dolphins hype is interesting to me. On one hand, this is a team with tons of playmakers on both sides of the football. On the other hand, the failures of this team in the playoffs and how bad they were should leave a bad taste in fans' mouths. The offensive line is still a complete and utter disaster, and I was pretty disappointed at how they failed to really make any moves to address what was clearly their biggest need. Patrick Paul is a fine prospect, but that's not a move that fixed everything. They lost Robert Hunt and Connor Williams, their two best interior offensive linemen, and Teron Armstead still has a significant injury history. You're asking for Austin Jackson to take a huge jump up, and we really haven't seen that. On top of that, the defensive line lost an absolute game record Christian Wilkins, and they also lost Andrew Van Ginkel, who was huge for this team last year, and I feel the additions in terms of pass rushers are still a bit unpolished. I wasn't a big Chop Robinson guy coming out, and so I think that one is a bit up in the air on how much of an impact he's going to have as a rookie. You also have to factor in Tua and what version of him do we get. I still think this is a quarterback that is solid, but I think they overpaid for him given his injury history, and I think there's a ton of question marks surrounding this team. I think this is a good team, but Dolphins fans saying that this is the clear favorite in the AFC East are fooling themselves. They have a talented roster, but with holes in the trenches, questions on Tua, I think we need to pump the brakes. In a loaded AFC, I think it is very likely that the Dolphins are going to miss the playoffs altogether. The fifth and final spot was extremely tough for me, but I ultimately went with the Atlanta Falcons. This is a team that is the odds-on favorite to win their division, and to be honest, it makes a lot of sense. This is a division that is pretty weak, but I think this is a team that has a lot of question marks. This is a defense that, outside of a couple of players in the secondary, is incredibly questionable. The defensive line really has no true number one. Grady Jarrett is coming off an injury, and on top of that, they got a new head coach in town after they already had a pretty good defense last year. They have a real no CB2. Their interior defensive line outside of David Onyemata is questionable, and while I think they could have a good run defense, I think their pass defense and pass rush is really going to struggle. On the offensive side of the ball, we have to ask questions around the coaching staff, and we have to ask questions around Kirk Cousins. They paid a lot of money for Kirk Cousins to come to Atlanta, and rightfully so. But he's coming off an Achilles injury, and how healthy is he going to be? On top of that, this is a defensive head coaching staff with Zach Robinson, a first-time play caller, going to be calling the shots here in Atlanta. I like this Falcons team. I think they've got a lot of upside, they've got a lot of weapons, and they could definitely win this division. But for them to have an over-under of 9.5 wins, I think that's a little bit too high given the defensive questions. If you get even solid quarterback play from Kirk Cousins, you should win around 9 games. But there is a lot of question marks around this team, And I think Tampa Bay is not too far off from Atlanta in terms of power rankings. So Atlanta is a team that I think might be getting a little bit overhyped entering this season. But that'll do it for me in this video. Let me know which teams you guys think are being overhyped entering next season, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Adios.